Welcome everybody back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson. We're talking Texas offense today. And before we do that, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. And look, if you like the video, if we entertain you even a little bit, hit that as well. Like double click for us because you're getting this for free. So like the least you could do is maybe like it, maybe subscribe because we are putting in the work. Mr. Richardson, we're talking Texas offense. We're talking top three players on the offensive side of the ball that most important for this Texas offense going into the 2021 season, a year that both you and I think is critical for a lot of reasons. We're eliminating the quarterback piece of this because then you and I would just do an hour podcast on Casey Thompson and Hudson Card, and there's no reason to do that. So let's go top three offense, most important players on offense for a little offseason football discussion. Non-quarterback variety. I almost feel like Bijan Robinson should be in the off-limits category as well, but for the sake of conversation, we can't rule out everybody.
Yeah.
So what you got?
All right. So yes, you want me to do my three, then you do your three, or you want to go like one by one?
Well, let's do all three together, and then we'll have time to react to everybody's thoughts and kind of go from there.
All right. So I'll start with the one, which, yes, your number one will be my number one, which would be Bijan, right? And I think I say that but you and I are kind of debating a little bit on this Bijan thing because you debate you bring up Deontay Foreman a lot and what he was able to do rushing for 2,000 yards in a season that Texas wins 5 games. And so what you've said before is like you see running backs and they may or may not have an impact, but I still think, as relates to the conversation, that if you are at University of Texas, you've got to lean on a young quarterback who doesn't have a lot of playing experience. I think Bijan ends up being the guy that you have to just lean on. Like the most important, when they say, players for a young quarterback is like a tight end, because you got to be able to have that check down. I think Bijan ends up being a guy that he gets a ton of carries. We know in the Steve Sarkisian offense, the running back traditionally gets a ton of carries. You just look back to his Alabama days, USC, Washington, back from Bishop Sankey. Like he just makes sure that guys get a run. So I would start with number one for me would be Bijan. Number two, gonna throw a little monkey wrench in there. I'm gonna throw in Derrick Kirsten for you. Because
I was not. Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a little bit of monkey wrench in there. I'm gonna put Derrick Kirsten in there. First of all, we all saw that horrific injury last year, and that was cringeworthy. Like, do not worry for the editing purposes. I will not put that photo on the screen. But Catch, when I start thinking about what's important, I think from that offensive line perspective, I think Derrick Kerstetter as a 6th-year guy, so he's a super senior, they need the quarterback on that offensive line. And, that's an offensive line that, is not as proven as you probably would hope for. You still got Christian Jones, got Junior Angilau, you got Denzel Okafor that's in there. And, with, Jake Majors is in there competing with Rafidi Gramai. But Derrick Kerstetter coming back from that injury and being able to anchor that offense, he would definitely be number 2 for me. And then I go to number 3, which would be the Jordan Whittington one, just because they seem to be that they're going to put a lot of emphasis on him in that passing game and being able to be a key contributor. And then there's no Jake Smith that's around. So there's a lot that's going to be placed on his shoulders. Joshua Moore wasn't a name we heard a lot of in the spring, Catch. We heard a lot of Jordan Whittington buzz, and Steve Sarkisian said, like, he's giving this guy a pass. Like, I know he was injured in the past. He's been healthy for us. He's been our top receiver. So those are my 3: Bijan, Kerstetter, and then Jordan Whittington.
Couple of thoughts. And first of all, I am going to omit Bijan. Bijan's the number 1 guy in a world where we're not talking quarterback, but for the sake of conversation, I'll go with a completely different 3 than your 3. When I talk about Bijan and I talk about the importance of the quarterback position, mind you, I would say two of the best 5 running back seasons that I've ever seen with my own eyes, maybe even 2 of the top 4, would have been Deontay Foreman just a few years ago, when all of that production, all of those numbers, all those great games, and it got his coach fired. And I'll also go back to 1997 when Texas had a senior quarterback in James Brown, one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the program. He essentially plays on a broken foot all season long. In 2021, he they just let him play in less than 4 games and they bring him back for another year. He didn't really have that option back then. He played through the injury. And Ricky Williams had one of the best running back seasons. He was better as a junior than he was as a senior when he won the Heisman Trophy. He was so good as a junior. Like, I don't know that I've ever, other than maybe Barry Sanders in his big season at Oklahoma State, that might be the only running back I've ever seen in my lifetime that at the college level was as good as Ricky Williams was as a junior. And they went 4-7. And they lost 66-3 to USC, or excuse me, to UCLA. It was as big of a disaster of a season that you could have. There was a lot of components that led to 4-7 that year, including a really difficult schedule. But from the running back position, you literally, other than Barry Sanders and the production that you couldn't have asked more from a running back and received more. And it still ultimately didn't make a difference in how good that team was. It's one of the reasons why you and I have we have this conversation every year. We talk about every damn position. We'll talk about everything. And at the end, it's like, it's about the quarterback though, isn't it? At Oklahoma every year, it ultimately is about the quarterback, right? I mean, when Spencer Rattler last year gets taken out of the Texas OU game, that entire team and program kind of in a bit of despair, no real identity. He comes back, he catches fire. Nothing else mattered in that game other than he was poor at the beginning. He was great towards the end. Oklahoma wins that game. Oklahoma wins another Big 12 championship. All they do is turn out great quarterback production. The quarterback's a quarterback. I'm not going to pick Bijan. He's the number 1 guy. But I just, there's something to be said about the rest of this supporting cast needing to be really good. My number 1 guy is Jordan. Oh, and real quick, Derrick Kirstetter. How good do we think Derrick Kirstetter is? Just when he's healthy, what is Derrick Kirstetter as a player to you before I go into my list? Because I'm with you. Kerstetter, if he's healthy and he's good, I think he allows this team to have a little bit more depth than we saw in the spring. And it allows them to potentially move some pieces around. But it's weird. Last year, going into his senior season, he had such good pass blocking stats as a right tackle the year before. They move him inside because they think that's the position that best suits him. And I don't know how good I think he was last year. I didn't think he lived up to what everybody thought he might be as a senior. And I wonder if in a redo, he gets a chance to be a senior all over again. I wonder what he is as a player, because I'm not sure he would have been drafted had he stayed healthy and just gone into the draft process.
I mean, I think he's, Zach Shackelford equivalent, but
Yeah.
I don't know at this point though. The only difference is Zach Shackelford going into his senior season had already been on an all Big 12 team, right? Yeah. So he was still recognized as one of the better centers that was, in the Big 12. I don't think Derrick Kirsten gets that. Like when the Big 12 team comes out, I'll be interested to see where he ranks.
Should he play tackle?
I mean, but then who do you bump out of that? Do you bump out Christian Jones out of that position? Are you bumping out?
Yeah. Look. Let's save the Christian Jones piece for a second because he's in my top 3.
Okay.
So I'm about to go into some Christian Jones. But outside of that, if you go to the spring game and you look at who played right tackle, Hayden Connor played 37 snaps. I'm looking at Alex's deep dig right now. Andrej Karic played 46 snaps. And then, you know, you look at like what was at the backup on the second team was Jalen Garth and Tope Imade. So, or Tope Amade. So I'm not quite sure, you know, I don't know that Angalau Majors and Denzel Okafor in the middle is better than if you put Kerstetter in there and potentially are able to move out Okafor, who he's not great and never will be. He's just, as he goes into his 6th season, I feel like we know who Denzel Okafor is, and he's a perfectly okay player. But I kind of like a threesome of Majors, Angalau, and Kerstetter more than I like Majors, Angalau, and Okafor. But I just wonder if Kerstetter is not best suited to play right tackle, especially when Christian Jones is your most reliable tackle option. Sorry, I couldn't even say that without laughing, Anwar.
I don't know why you're laughing. Are you laughing at the options that are available,
or Texas? To me, because look, Kyle Flood and Sark and this entire offensive staff can prove me way wrong. This is not a great group of players. And the thing is, we don't talk enough about this team losing Sam Cosmi. And Karic came in last year and played really well in the last 2 games, almost making you forget that he was a young player and that Cosmi was even missing. I don't know that sustains itself over a full season. You've got to keep in mind they played Kansas State as one of those games, and I've never seen a team I still can't believe they let Texas do them like that in Manhattan. So I don't know. I don't know. Let me ask you this then. Is Derrick Kirsten the best tackle on this team? Is Christian Jones better than him?
I mean, I don't know what we really know about Christian Jones at this point.
Yeah. You're right.
Is his ceiling potentially higher? I mean, we know the former staff, liked him a lot. And thought very highly of him. And we know this staff thinks very highly of as well. But yeah, you're talking about an offensive line right now that we don't look at anybody that says you feel like that's a future NFL player. I mean, Derrick Kirsten, Denzel Okafor, if not for a pandemic, I mean, they're working real jobs at this point, right? They have started their life. So,
because I don't know that either Kerstetter goes to an NFL training camp, but Okafor doesn't.
You think? I don't. I think. I don't know. I mean, Kerstetter maybe gets signed.
Yeah, I don't say. I think he
goes
as a free
agent.
Camp. Yeah,
or maybe I don't know.
Maybe he'd have been a 7th round pick.
You said what?
Maybe he could have been a 7th round pick.
Zach Jackerford was first team, Big 12 2 straight years, and he went.
Kerstetter's bigger than Shackelford, though.
Yeah,
that's less about how he graded in college and more about the fact that Shackelford's size really limited him. Whereas Kerstetter, he's a big dude. That's a guy that in the NFL can play multiple positions. So maybe he's never a guy that you would want to be a starter in the NFL. But if you're going to take 8 or 9 offensive linemen and you've got a guy that can play 5 positions or 4 positions, I could see Kerstetter getting a shot. And you know what? I think Kerstetter has a chance to play and make an NFL roster, but it still doesn't answer how good. I just outlined why I think he could have a chance. Super versatile. I'm asking you, should he play center or should he play right tackle? And that is not a conversation that you and I might ever have about another player that plays at the University of Texas. This may be a one-off. Next year when Jake Majors is the starter, we're not going to be saying do you think Jake Majors should play left tackle or right tackle? Like, we won't. Like, Kerstetter's a unique guy, but the uniqueness is completely connected to his versatility and not necessarily because he's a plus player.
Okay. Well, give us your top three.
Top three. Number one, for me, even if we, you know what, I can at least make the case, even if it's not the correct case, but I could make a case that Jordan Whittington should be number one in a world where we're not talking quarterbacks, just because I think somebody on this team has to be able to be the guy. And of what they currently have on the roster, he, if not him, I mean, I'm not quite sure who else it's going to be. It's too much to ask of Troy O'Meara this early in his career. It'd be a good problem to have if he exploded in such a way that, you know, a guy that's never played a snap can play 60, 70% of the snaps and be the A guy in an offense that wants to throw the football. Like, that would be a nuclear response. I don't know what to completely make of Joshua Moore. I don't think there's anybody else yet that's really in the conversation. I mean, we were talking about who the big three at receiver are. It probably is O'Meara, Whittington, and Joshua Moore. And then, you know, can Kelvonte Dixon climb the ranks? Can Xavier Worthy in year one do something similar? It's hard. What do we make of Marcus Washington? Who knows? So I think if not Jordan Whittington, I said it in a podcast last week, I think the Texas offense is in real trouble if they can't get a healthy full season, both in terms of on the field and producing. So Whittington's critical because I just don't know what they do at receiver. I don't know who the alphas end up being. I don't know who's ready for that. Number two for me, and you know what, we could almost make this like like you pick Kerstetter. I'm going to go with Christian Jones simply because he has started at tackle in his career, but they've got him penciled for the left side right now. And okay, this will be a real test of how good of a coach Kyle Flood is along the offensive line for them to take a guy who at tackle last year showed flashes, but wasn't consistently a plus player at all. And that he would step in and be the guy at left tackle to protect the blind side of either Casey Thompson or Hudson Card. I think, you know, it's weird. Texas has had really good the whole time you've been here, basically at Orange Bloods, left tackle play hasn't been a huge problem because they've had Connor Williams and Sam Cosme. And you're like, what's the big deal? Why is everybody talking about, like, from what you've seen in the majority of, God, if I had to do the math, like all 6 of your seasons, I guess you've seen coming into this year, you've seen good left tackle.
7 seasons.
Yeah. This will be your 7th.
No,
right?
This will be 8.
God, I literally cannot. I'm so getting
You keep
old.
doing this. All
14,
3 years of Charlie.
15, 16, 17, 18. You're right. You know what it is? It's that it sneaks that number in there when you do like 2021 minus 2014, it's 7, but you got to carry the 1. It's like a ghost season. So you're right.
You just got to go Charlie's 8. First year until now. So 3 of Charlie, 4 of Tom.
You're right. 3 plus 4 plus 1. You're right. That is the way. Math. It is such simple math that it's embarrassing for me, but you're exactly right. I will think of it like that. And from now on, I'll never make that mistake again. 3 and 4 and we'll see moving forward. This is number 1. But look, Christian Jones has to be high up the list because if it's not him, I think at that point we're not even. Kerstetter can't play left tackle, so then you're legitimately talking about Andre Karich, who I think could be the guy, but again, really young. Look, we're talking about this team needing to play at a level to win 10 games. Not this. This is a hard year for me to be able to convince anyone, hey, don't worry about the record. This is about developing guys. Don't worry about how many games you win. If at the end of the year, Carrick looks like a guy that can play on a championship team in 2022, nothing else really matters. That is not the case. Texas needs to be good this year. Sark has to win games this year. And when you look at this offensive line, it has a number of pieces that I think by the end of the year have a chance to be really good players. But a lot of these guys are, Jake Majors, he never played against Oklahoma. He's never played in a game of that magnitude. Hayden Connor, Andrej Carrick, a lot of these guys just haven't, let alone developed into good players. They haven't done their first yet. They haven't been broken in to large degrees. They need Christian Jones to make a jump, because if he can't, this offensive line is going to have real problems. And then if I was picking a third guy, I'm going to go wild card here. God, I'm going to put in a lot of pressure on this kid, but I'm in love with Xavier Worthy. And if there's a guy, I don't want to say that anybody on this team could have a Devontae Smith type season at Alabama. Literally, you should throw me out of a building if I had said that. But from a skill set standpoint, he fits the athletic profile of what we know really works in this offense. Worthy's the only guy on the roster that makes me think, you know what, in 3 years, his athletic profile, if the light switch flips on and he turns out to be good, like he's got legit 10-3, 10-4, 100 meter speed, he can go. So he is a guy that even if he doesn't catch a lot of balls, if you tell me that Xavier Worthy has 6 or 7 touchdowns this season, don't tell me how many catches he has. I don't need him to get to 700 yards and 80. If you tell me he gets 6 or 7 touchdowns, that lets me know that his talent is going to be able to be on the field and be something that defenses have to account for. And that's what this Texas offense lacks. Bijan Robinson is one of those guys that all 11 players on the defense is going to know where he's at on every play. Texas has to have some players that can take a little bit of that focus away. And that's why I look at Xavier Worthy, because of his speed. He's a guy that if they can just get him on the field and comfortable, you can just line him up and have him run deep all the time. And some of those 11 guys are going to have to take their focus off of Bijan and keep it on the guy that can run 10-3. And so knowing that he's the only guy quite like that, I'm going to sneak him into my top 3 while also acknowledging he might only catch 10 passes this year. Like it might be that he's just not ready and I'm putting too much on his shoulders, but he's the best offensive player that signed for the Longhorns in this past recruiting year. Just because it happened in April, don't let that fool you into thinking that somehow this isn't a borderline 5-star talent. I think Sark's going to want to get him on the field. If he's ready, he's a guy that can take the top off of a defense and emerge very quickly as a key piece of the Texas offense.
What's interesting, it's interesting that in your top 3, as we kind of get, I know we're going to wrap up soon, but in your top 3, 2 of the guys are receivers. And that's fascinating from that perspective, because, this is, offense that doesn't have Brennan Eagles, and doesn't have, Jake Smith, and is leaning on guys that there isn't a single guy on this roster who had more than 500 yards receiving last year. Like the leading receiver last year from returning receiver is Joshua Moore with 30 receptions, 472 yards and 9 TDs. I mean, and
Sark had Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith coming back last year.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
It's interesting because Sark said something, recently. He said, it's, and I think it's one of these luncheons that he was at. He's been doing that luncheon tour. I've been to, all of them. And so it's kind of all blending together. But on one of them, he said, it's easy to look like a really good coach when you have great players. It's a little bit difficult when you don't have, the great players. And so we'll find out really soon when you don't have guys competing for Heisman's and you're inheriting a roster which you don't have a guy that had more than 500 yards receiving. I mean, it's Joshua Moore, like what I told you, Jordan Whittington had 21 receptions for 206 yards. After that, Kai Money, Brendan Schooler, but he's on defense now. Kai Money had 10 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. Marcus Washington had 4 for 56 and a touchdown. Avante Woodard, 4 for 34. Kelvonte Dix, 3 for 76. I mean, hell, I said 500. I mean, once I get past Jordan Whittington, you're asking who broke 100 at that point. So it's interesting. When you start talking about the work that needs to be done, and I know you've mentioned Andre Coleman before. Boy, you got a lot of work to do, Coach Coleman, because you've got to get some guys ready to be able to say, like, this is your go-to person. They didn't really have one last year. I guess Brendan Eagles was kind of it at times, but that we won't go relive that debate. It's interesting that you got the Jordan Whittington. Yeah, we won't do Brendan Eagles versus Caden Stearns today.
I'm done.
Jordan and Xavier. I think we both agree on Jordan, though. Absolutely, if that's going to be their guy to lean on. But those guys got to stay healthy. And yeah, you need someone who can take the top off, because you hadn't really seen that. And there's other teams that did the fascinating thing, Catches, when you watch Oklahoma play, they're able to do quick strikes. And the one thing that Sarkisian did say recently is that he doesn't want an offense that's having like these long plays, all these number of drives, 15-play drive, this and that. He said it's the shorter ones that give you the explosive plays. It's that 6-7 play drive where it's run past, and then all of a sudden someone goes to the house. That's what he's hoping to obtain. So those, the 3 guys that you focused in on, or at least the 2 guys that you focused in on, definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll just say, to that point that you made about Sark, the problem with those long sustaining drives is that the teams that are best in the best shape to do such a thing are players with older, experienced offensive lines and just older teams. Because when you got to go 10 or 12 plays and say 70 yards, you're asking a lot of guys to be on the money, play in and play out. No penalties. There's no, to go 10, 12 plays and end it in a touchdown. Can't have any holding calls. Can't give up a sack. Can't do all of the fine details correctly across the board consistently down the field. It's tough for pro teams to consistently get in the end zone when you're asking to do that. Yeah. I mean, think about how much better Bijan Robinson can be as a player when Texas has some players at receiver that are causing safeties to have to know where they are at the snap of the ball. I mean, their focus actually has to be on something besides Bijan. And I think the real concern I have about this Texas offense right now, I worry about them playing in a phone booth. And I know Sark will have his quarterbacks throw the ball down the field to try to open things up. But young quarterbacks, we said this about Shane Buechele a lot when he was a young guy, that too much of his success occurred between the line of scrimmage and like 5 to 7, 8 yards. And everything in the intermediate and the deep was tough for him. But, he had a high completion percentage, but most of it was with near the line of scrimmage. I think my concern about this Texas offense, or at least one of them, is that until a guy like Xavier Worthy kind of proves himself, there aren't a lot of guys that have me thinking that this Texas offense can have the big plays down the field. I mean, they've got guys like O'Meara and Whittington and Joshua Moore. They've got guys that can do it, but those guys have been so inconsistent, or they haven't played at all at this point, that I don't know. Like, I'm a little worried that the quarterback's comfort is going to be throwing short and underneath because they won't trust staying in the pocket or staying. Not so much Casey Thompson. He will throw the ball down the field. But I don't know if I trust his receivers right away. So I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts to this Texas offense, but being able to have somebody that can just scare teams is critical. And right now, Texas has like one guy that can scare teams. Look, real quick.
I got myself real quick before we go off the top. The last thing I want to say, in addition, because you said something about penalties that reminded me of Kerstetter. he's got to tighten up on that. Remember, he had the bad personal foul penalty on OU, had another one versus Baylor. So he had some personal foul penalties. The penalty thing is one thing. For him to be one of the top 3 important guys, he's got to clean that up.
Who are the most important players on the Texas offensive side of the ball? 1, 2, 3. Tell us in the comments. You're not allowed to use the quarterback. You can use Bijan if you want to, but it's kind of cheating, even if it almost certainly is the correct answer. Leave your choices in the comments, though. We want to check them out. Hit the like button if we've entertained you and you've made it this far. Hit that subscribe button. We'll talk to you tomorrow. We'll be talking about the top 3 players on the defensive side of the ball. Later.